Rubicon. We're going to start this program that we've organized for today. A very exciting opportunity, I think, to have a chance to talk to our neighbors and friends in Tribeca. I'm Ham Fish. I publish, edit, and publish the Washington Spectator. The editorial offices are based in Tribeca on Hudson Street. We have a general concern about issues of public accountability. We work very hard to promote the public interest and to hold people who steamroll the public interest accountable for their actions. I have the great good fortune today of welcoming Stephanie Kelemen, who is this is low tech, this aspect of it, who's our guest. She's a crisis litigator here at Quinn Emanuel, but her principal credential and what's especially relevant for today's conversation is that she's the president of the Community First Development Coalition. And this is a wonderful group, hundreds of neighbors, friends in the Tribeca area, downtown below Canal Street, who have come together around multiple issues, generally, I think, aligned around this sort of big question of, what is a community and what's a neighborhood, and what are the challenges that we're facing, and how do we start thinking in a more coherent way about what we want from our community. And I wanted to ask Stephanie at the outset if she would tell us a little bit about the coalition and the work that they're doing, and what the basic principles are at the core of the advocacy that you're promoting.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for the introduction. Thanks to everyone for logging on. So the Community First Development Coalition was sort of founded in the wake of an announcement that a developer wanted to build a 900-foot plus ultra luxury condominium tower in the heart of Tribeca. When I first heard about this, have never been really involved in New York City politics, and there was something about it that just really didn't sit right. This tower was being built on the site of a former school where the developer did not renew the lease, and the school had to move to sort of make way for this tower. On the site of current affordable housing, where the developer is paying people to move out of those affordable housing units in order to demolish them. Adjacent to a senior center, which provides services to a lot of seniors, even much broader than the Tribeca area. And it is nestled right in between two what was historically affordable Mitchell-Lama housing, but went market rate and now provides a good deal of contractual affordable housing. And then right on top of a number of historic landmark properties. And
just before you go further, because you've launched us into the heart of the matter, what is a 900-foot building? How do we even conceptualize what that represents? I know that in terms of our daily movements around our neighborhood, most of the buildings are 5 stories, 6 stories. Every now and then, you find a building that's maybe 7 or 8 stories because elevator technology had got advanced in like 1880, so they could go up that high. But this is not a neighborhood that has a large number of those kinds of buildings. But what does a 900-foot building look like?
Yeah, so to put it in perspective, if anyone's familiar with Tribeca and the IPN Independence Plaza development, those are about 40 stories.
These are on the westernmost part of the community.
Yep.
They line West Street, they line the Hudson River.
Yep.
They look across at New Jersey, and they're conspicuously the tallest buildings in the area. And you said 40.
Those are about 40.
Okay.
And so it's, difficult to say how many stories a 900-foot tower would be because it depends on the ceiling height. And we can get into in ultra luxury, they might go for more ceiling height, less units. But it's roughly equivalent to about 90 stories. So we're talking more than double those surrounding buildings.
And is that the most that can be put into these development opportunities, or can they build higher?
It's not. So in Tribeca right now, there are no height limits at all. And this plot in particular could go higher, especially under some of the charter revisions. We think it's possible the developer may try to do something that's higher than 1,000 feet.
So what's it? Do we have other buildings in New York that are examples of what it means to go higher than 900?
Sure. So the best example in Tribeca would be the Jenga Tower. The Jenga Tower is somewhere around 1,000 feet. And that is currently the tallest building in Tribeca.
And that's Leonard and Church.
Right. And it's possible that this one would be taller. Now, there are also other sites on Tribeca where it could be even taller than that. And we've looked at those sites, and there is the possibility for the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere to be built in Tribeca under current zoning.
And these are I think we're all sort of low-rise people, but we think of them as needles. These sort of thin pencil-like buildings that dot the perimeter of Central Park. I think if people are familiar with those locations,
right? It's much like what's happening up there, what is commonly referred to as Billionaires Row, and that's exactly what we're talking about being possible in Tribeca on about 8 different sites.
Okay, so that's the alarming reality. Tell us a little bit about the coalition and the priorities.
Yes, so the coalition came together because of the announcement about this one tower. But as I think people began getting involved, I think there was this sort of common feeling that to really do this and to invest the amount of time that we all have been investing, it needs to be a broader mission than this one specific site. And what we did was we assembled a group of people who feel very passionately about Tribeca, who feel very passionately that it is important to build a diverse community, a community in which it's tolerable to live there, and a community that cares about the environment. And so we've looked at that from a number of different angles. And so for us, it's not just we don't want this building, it's how can we make real affordability in Tribeca. Mm-hmm. And that's what we have been very focused on for the last couple of years.
So affordability, diversity,
mm-hmm.
Environmental awareness, mm-hmm. Which are cornerstones of what community looks like going forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And do we want to relax some of the excitement and mention the developer's name at this early juncture?
So the developer who is interested in this particular 900-foot building that we're talking about is Vornado Realty. And they are one of the biggest developers in New York City. They're pretty focused on New York City specifically, though they do operate outside of New York City as well. And you may know them if you've gone to Penn Station, you come out of Penn Station, it's almost dystopian. There's Vornado Realty signs everywhere. That whole area is being redeveloped by Vornado. And that's where I think most people know them from. And now their eye is shifting to Tribeca.
And this is a huge real estate company. Is it maybe one of the largest?
It is a publicly traded company. I'm not sure whether it's the largest, but it is one of the most influential in New York, certainly.
How do we define influence? That's an interesting comment. Obviously, these are corporations that have developed a very close relationship with public administration, with government agencies. Are we concerned that there's too much coziness there? Are we concerned that government may not be able to enforce its objectives in this relationship?
It's certainly a concern of mine that the relationship with big real estate in New York has become a little bit too cozy. And you see that specifically happening with Vornado. Vornado is a company that spends on significantly on lobbying. It spends significantly on elections, and it has spent decades developing relationships with influential people in New York City, as well as our sitting president. And when you look at New York City,
Sitting president, not of our coalition, but of the United States.
Correct. So Steve Roth is the CEO of Vornado Realty Trust, and he has close ties with Donald Trump. And so, for us, looking at what it takes to develop in New York City, it's a highly complex regulatory framework. And Vornado and companies like them are able to go in and influence policy such that it incentivizes the type of that is most profitable for them.
Maximizes their profit. So let's go back to your harrowing description of this project. Just quickly, what's the status of the project? Have they proposed the next step, or is that something everyone's waiting for?
So with the announcement of City of Yes, the developer sort of has gone quiet.
City of Yes.
The new, New York's housing, I guess, new policy initiative that was rolled out under the Adams administration.
Okay. So it's a new regime.
It's a new regime.
It's designed to cut through some red tape, designed to encourage development, make it easier, I think, is most generally understood. And so they've been quiet since then. I think maybe there was some guessing that they were waiting for the outcome of the election to see where the dust settled and where the policy priorities would be. But at the time prior to this, going back to your 900-foot tower, I'm assuming from your description that none of the priorities of the coalition are reflected in this project.
That's right. From our perspective, we are not an anti-development organization, but we are for responsible development, community first development. And this project does really none of that. We are concerned with the loss of affordable housing that's taking place in order to build this. We're concerned with the threat to our historic landmarks.
Let's go back to affordable housing. Can we don't have to pretend it's obviously something that's widely known. Tribeca became, over time, one of the most expensive neighborhoods in the city. It went very quickly from really like warehouses and large unoccupied spaces, which artists originally gravitated to, and then, as is so often the pattern, more affluent people came after them. Larger spaces were subdivided, and landing us where we are today, which is per foot basis, a very expensive place. So, what does it mean to have affordable housing in Tribeca?
It's a difficult question because in some ways we've lost affordability. We've already gone too far. So in some ways it's a matter of not continuing that trend and becoming this neighborhood that is completely inaccessible to anyone without inherited wealth or, significant assets. So to define affordability is a little challenging. For us, I think that there is certainly affordability in the sense of, people who need housing programs in order to live in New York City. But there's also the aspect of being a place where the working class can live. If you have restaurants in your neighborhood, can you have the people who work in those restaurants live there? Are they needing to commute from outside? Can your school teachers live there? And so when we talk about affordability, there is a range that we're talking about. And it is just, from our perspective, about fostering socioeconomic diversity.
Now, from the perspective of the regulators, is there a formula that defines affordability?
So many of the affordability programs are based on AMI, which is about sort of the income that you take in as a family. So there's a formula that says if you make this much money and you have this many people in your household, Where do you sit relative to the median income? Where do you sit relative to the poverty line? And it says, for example, you can be 60% of the median income, and that can be an affordable program. Deeply affordable is generally defined as more like 30 to 40%. And those would be sort of programs that are offered either as incentives to developers in terms of what needs to be built, or programs for people to enter into to get housing.
So in the past, what has been the pattern? Have we seen mayors who wanted to promote affordable housing making the concession to developers to encourage them to build ambitious projects in order to get affordable units in return? That is a sort of a rough description of the strategy.
It's a little bit. So I think that the philosophy in New York, in some ways, is really best captured by the title of City of Yes, which is if you build more housing at any level, even at the ultra luxury level, that will result in more affordability. And so in some ways, the city policy has been,
there's greater supply.
Right. The idea is that if you increase the supply of housing, prices fall.
Okay.
Very basic supply and demand.
And what in reality has been the result of this?
So we've actually looked at this in Tribeca, and this is commonly referred to as trickle-down economics. And we've looked at, okay, well, the theory works like this. Let's say that you build the new ultra luxury 900-foot tower that we're talking about, and the average selling point is a $6 million condo. Well, someone's going to buy that $6 million condo, and the theory is that then they would move out of a unit that then would have aged or become less valuable, and then someone could move into that unit, and it would trickle down to
at a lower price point.
So, we've asked the question of, is that really true? And in Tribeca, what we've seen is that there has been a large influx of volume in terms of the number of housing units, not looking at the price point. And so with that increase of supply, you should see falling prices. What we've seen is in the last 10 years, the housing supply has gone up, I think, 45% in Tribeca.
Really? For ownership.
In terms of number of units.
Does that also include rental?
That includes rental.
Okay, so.
But the trick is here, if you look at what's happened with pricing. So pricing for condos and co-ops has been pretty flat, if not a little bit of downward pressure. It's been hovering between the average of $4 to $5 million mark, which, just to take a step back, is an astronomical median price point, not reachable for most average people. And then if you look at what's been happening in the rental market, rental prices have almost doubled in that period. So you're seeing the skyrocketing of rental prices and this downward pressure at the top. Well, what's interesting is that actually should be the beginning of the trickle down, right? Because in Tribeca, the housing volume that we've had is at the very top end of the market in terms of what is being built. We've had in the last 10 years, the Jenga Tower, 111 Murray, the Four Seasons Tower, and the Woolworth Tower all developed. And those are the four ultra luxury towers in Tribeca. They have added some number of new construction. And what you're seeing in those buildings is in some cases actually falling prices. People are selling at a loss. Okay, great. The trickle down is here, but it's not, because you still have the astronomical rents rising for the lower end of the market. And so what we think that shows is that actually the theory of build more at any level of the market, build more ultra luxury and affordability will follow, is just false when it comes to Tribeca.
It has the ring of a self-serving declaration. Again, back to that proposed tower. What's the location you were describing very specifically? What it was next to, and what's going on in that location, but what's an address that we're looking at? Is it somewhere on Greenwich?
It's on Greenwich Street. I think the official address is 335 Greenwich, but if you put that into Google, it will be an existing IPN tower that comes up.
What's across street there? J or
It's J in Greenwich.
J in
It's
Greenwich.
right where
on the west side of the street?
right.
And um, who goes by there every day? I mean, my kids went to 234, which is the public school down on Chambers and Greenwich. My recollection was that hundreds of parents and their kids are walking up and down that part of Tribeca all day long as they commute back and forth from to school and where they live.
Absolutely. It's a lot of people going to 234. There's also a sort of more outsized senior population in that area because a lot of the residents of IPN are sort of more of the older generation of Tribecans that came down here a few decades ago and have stayed. And so we do have a good senior population on there, and I think they actually just added some benches on the sidewalk so that people could rest more easily, and that was a big initiative.
We have a wonderful market, a couple days a week.
Mm-hmm.
Big attraction for small number of vendors, but big attraction for people in the area. And then you mentioned some historic housing also over on that side.
Right. So there are what are sometimes referred to as the federal townhouses. They are these row townhouses that look like they're straight out of the 1700s because they are.
They are.
They actually were, so that whole area used to be filled with row houses like that. And right adjacent to it was a market that used to be sort of a center of commerce and trade in New York City.
I wanted to ask you about that. I spent a little bit of my time studying what you're referring to, which is Washington Market.
Yes.
And it was the gateway to the level of wholesale commerce in the 19th century. New Jersey farmers sold their wares there. Importers from Russian steppes sold their canned goods there. Chocolatiers shows, American Express was born out of all of this because messages needed to be carried from the wholesalers to other parts of the city. We have the Commodities Exchange on Harrison Street from 1880, maybe 1884, because they recognized that there were goods being bought and sold in the Washington market that could be the basis for its own marketplace. So they created the original commodities basis, and then a number of other buildings. People familiar with Tribeca will know some of these really exquisite iron buildings that were constructed in the 1880s, 90s, turn of the century, 7-story buildings which remain today and are, I think, a very significant part of the attraction of the area for tourism as much as for people who live there. So how much of a emphasis can we make on the historical character and integrity of a community? Is that just a romantic idea, or is it more central?
I mean, I think that it's important to preserve some amount of history. There's, of course, a balance because the city does need to evolve and modernize. But
so you're not proposing that we return to the streets that are paved with the shelves of oysters?
Wouldn't that be romantic?
We had that.
Yeah, well, now we have our cobblestone streets, which are also lovely. But no, I think it's a balance, and I think there have been some properties that have been deemed historically significant enough that they are worthy of our protection over time. And those, historic townhouses are one example of that. Those are not just in a landmark district where they have the historic character like many of the cast iron buildings, but those are individually landmarked. That's because those ones, there used to be more of them, and they were sort of picked out to be saved when there was a redevelopment of that area.
When we bought our home, which was 1997, I mean, I would say recently, although it's alarming to think that's almost 30 years ago. Um, if you walked in, there was cork on the walls and the ceiling. And this was 19th century refrigeration. New Jersey farmers brought their dairy products into those 5-story brick buildings that line the both north and south of all those streets, Jay and Harrison and going down to Duane below. And the interior fittings that were 115 years old were still intact.
Wow.
And evocative of a lifestyle of people who would either use a barge or come over, on a horse-drawn carriage and bring their wares and keep them in that environment and then sell them 2 blocks, to the west in the market. And it was such a striking. I mean, I hated to remove it, even though it's practical to keep it, but it was really like walking into a historic moment, and it's stayed with me as a reminder of the role that this part of the city has played in not just the history of New York, but the whole history of the eastern part of the country.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think that it's important to maintain Tribeca's not only more farther back history, but it's more recent history as well, which is that it's a community of a lot of artists who moved here, a lot of more working class people who came to Tribeca back in the day when it was giant warehouse lofts of old factories that nobody wanted to live in or knew what to do with. And there was this sort of culture of, this is our neighborhood now, and we're going to invest in it and we're going to fight for it. And the modern history of Tribeca is civil activism that has led to our beautiful parks and our wide streets and the maintenance of our historic properties. And that is in some sense why Tribeca is the crown jewel of Manhattan and why it is so expensive and desirable to live there. It's because people fought for it.
And you mentioned Mitchell Lama before,
Mm-hmm.
when you were talking about Independence Plaza, I think.
Mm-hmm.
What was the history of that?
So when Independence Plaza was first developed, it entered into a affordable housing program called Mitchell Lama. And Mitchell Lama housing was more for a sort of mid-tier affordability. And
so it would be mixed use.
It was so more for working class families, like sort of less deeply affordable and more, families that had dual incomes, but for teachers and firefighters and that sort of position. So they had the Mitchell Lama housing program for many years. And at a certain point, the developer decided that it didn't want to continue the program anymore. And for the landlord Stellar. And so Stellar transitioned out of Mitchell Lama housing. When that happened, this is another great moment of seeing the culture of Tribeca. The people who lived there sort of united and said, well, we're all going to lose our homes. You just transition this into fully market housing. And they were able to negotiate a settlement with the landlord in which they would be able to remain in their homes and they would be able to remain in units that were affordable to them for the duration of their lifetime. And so what you see there is actually really important, because when a new developer like Vornado comes in and talks about the affordability they're going to provide in that area, what they're really saying is that they're going to continue to comply with the contractual obligation that they have to provide those housing units to the people who negotiated for that. But what we're seeing right now is a net loss of affordable housing, as many of those people are aging and passing away, and those units exit out of the contractual obligation to be affordable.
And you mentioned they were being bought out as well.
Right. So the units that are being bought out are the IPN townhouses, which are different from
Oh,
the
I see.
federal
Okay.
townhouses that are landmarked. And these were also sort of part of the same development with Independence Plaza and then Michelama Housing. But some of those units are currently in various types of affordable programs. When you are in affordable housing, New York State has guaranteed you certain protections. And that means that for you to leave your housing really is your choice. The landlord can't just say, like, you know what, I don't want to rent to you anymore. The end. They have to continue renting to you unless you choose to leave.
So it's fair to say that the diverse range of residents in our community are under siege. We're in a period of flux. We're in a period of transition, tremendous pressure, financial, economic pressure, regulatory pressure. Um, uh, Looking again at that posed project, are we imagining that any of the people that we're talking about will find a home in that project, or is that purely a high-end proposition?
That new proposed project will very likely, we do not know from the developer, but very likely be condos. And they will very likely be multi-million-dollar condos.
So we're talking about a whole new influx of ultra wealthy people in this project via this project. Are they what's the history on these projects? Do people actually live in these buildings?
Yeah, it's a good point actually, because many of these projects tend to attract international investment. When you're talking about property at this high level in these desirable locations in the many thousands per square foot price points, that starts to open up a different market than New Yorkers who need a place to live. And so that's where you see these condos being used as an investment vehicle rather than a home, similar to the way that ultra wealthy people may buy art to invest in. And so, I don't have the numbers because I don't think that this is something where there's been any sort of transparency behind what's going on. But if you look at the Jane Goode Tower at night, you will see that most of it is dark.
Well, it's not different from walking down Fifth Avenue. So the going back to the agenda that your coalition has been working on, are you imagining the introduction of any kind of regulatory reform that would incentivize or perhaps even require developers to incorporate a prescribed amount of affordable housing in these developments?
Right. I mean, so, it's easy for me to sit up here and talk all about the problem, but what is the solution? And that's something we've been looking at as well. I think for us, when we've looked at the trends and what's happening in Tribeca, it has become clear that first of all, to get real affordability, you have to mandate affordability with new developments. And so, for example, the as of right development, like the proposed tower, does not have mandatory affordable housing. It also needs to be permanent.
It doesn't have it. What you're saying is that there's nothing on the books that requires them to do this.
Correct.
So what leverage is there?
Well, we have seen in projects like this where there is pressure from the community and the public, and that pressure does ultimately result in affordability.
And does that apply in our circumstance? I know we have some elected officials who've been openly sympathetic with the concerns that you're expressing. I think Chris Marte is certainly among a name that comes regularly in that category. Are you seeing any avenues, perhaps with the arrival of the new mayor? Are you seeing any avenues that suggest that there's a potential for opening up a negotiation in this area?
It remains to be seen, I think. From our perspective, we have a pretty fundamental disagreement with this particular developer and what they're trying to do. We think that to develop something of this scale in that location presents a big problem. We also have a fundamental disagreement with this developer as to whether they can safely build there practically without destroying people's homes.
No, we haven't even gotten to that. I mean,
and so, from our perspective, I think that there might be some real issues that we have that make it difficult to negotiate. But I think
are these speaking to the one of our leading young litigators in the city, are these actionable, do you think?
Certainly, if you are going to build something and it's going to cause irreparable harm to somebody's home that they are living in, there is a cause of action for that. So that's something that we've
And you've got some fragile 18th century basements very much nearby.
Exactly. We have those, the federal townhouses are actually made structurally of wood. And so we have had an engineer look into those, and we do have deep concerns, specifically part of the excavation process that would need to take place deep in order to make the footprint for the building, and the vibrations could cause those houses not only to be harmed, but could cause a real safety problem for the people living in them.
And how long is it going to take to build one of these things? A couple of years?
It could take many years before a project like this is completed.
A massive disruption right in the heart of the residential area.
Correct. And I think it's also important to take into account the possibility that they may never finish, which is a growing trend we've seen in New York of these really, really ambitious projects being built in locations that really shouldn't be developed in this manner, getting really far down the road, realizing it's not viable, and abandoning it. We see that in the financial district right now. There is a tower that looks pretty close to being built, but is leaning. And that project was abandoned and bankrupt, and may never be finished. It also may never be taken down.
So you're in the paradoxical position of working incredibly hard to try to prevent these things from happening, but at the same time wanting some guarantee of completion once they get going.
Right. I mean, we have a building on Park Place in Tribeca right now that is half built, and there is a crane sitting on top of it. And that project has been stalled out and abandoned for many years. And, to even just leave it with the crane on top and have there be no accountability for something like that, we think is a problem. And for us, the problem is really before you start. Let's be realistic. And, the developer has taken the position that they're not even required to do an environmental study before beginning a project of this magnitude.
Really?
And that just simply can't be the case.
Yeah, well, we know there are extreme environmental sensitivities in this area. I mean, we've just been dealing with the aftermath of Sandy, where we were flooded, and there's a whole process going on just on the other side of this building site involving catchment water efforts to prevent the water from overwhelming the barriers and flooding the community and the basements of everybody who lives there and so forth. Do you have, I appreciate what you said about, it's premature to make commitments to one direction or another, but do you have a vision of what a reasonable development project ought to look like in these sites? I mean, obviously 140 stories is just, absurd to contemplate, and its impacts on a low-rise neighborhood. We don't have to dwell on it; they're self-evident. But is there a sort of place in the spectrum of these opportunities where there's an affordability component, there's an environmental sensitivity component, there's a reasonable height level that would be sort of proportionate with the area in which these things are being built? Is that a real conversation?
I'm not an urban planning expert. Um, could they find a way to thread the needle and do all of those things? Maybe. Um, I think from our perspective, the height in itself is not the problem here. The problem is the impact to the community of what that means. And what it means is that you're building ultra luxury. What it means is that you're like demolishing what is currently there. What it means is that you're risking harm to other properties, and then there's also components of the shadow. But so the question really for me is not what it looks like, but what does it do for the community? And that's where I think, this particular developer has said, for example, they don't need to go through the ULURP process. And part of the point of the ULURP process is for the community to have a voice and have a say. And so part of our objection to this project and what the developer has said about it is, no, you don't get to do something of that magnitude without the community having a say. What that means, it's not for me to say, it's for the community.
Sure.
And that's where we're continuing to try to.
So this is your educational role.
Right, exactly. We're trying to, get out there more and interact with people in the community to understand, what it is that the community wants and needs and what is appropriate for this
And I
community.
think for, certainly on our street, you're talking about a process of stages. The first was just introducing the reality of this thing. These are people who live a block away. And what it would mean, for their home and neighborhood. And that took weeks really of I think your wonderful group had a town hall and they had a number of like meet and greets where people had a chance to ask tough questions. And I saw that there were authoritative people were gathered to try to give responsible responses to these concerns. And it certainly made it very quickly the subject du jour of folks on the street. And we have a little sort of sub community of people who have to move their cars with alternate side of the street parking, and so they all know each other. And there's this kind of twice weekly gathering of the suffering who have to stand out there and hope that they don't get ticketed. And but that was a conversation that was going on during those mornings, I recall. And I think it's very alarming to people to imagine something that's just so disproportionate to all of the different levels that you're talking about. Did you have any thoughts about how this process is carried out? I think for a lot of people, it's very opaque. There's no real sense of who's behind it, what their goal is, who's benefiting, who has the authority to green light it, what's the timetable. I mean, they all sort of feel a little pressed, I think, by the absence of any real transparency.
Right. And, but it's certainly by design on the developer's part. Right now, the developer has essentially announced the plans and presented to CB1 one time. And then they have laid silent in wait. And part of that is because, they know that there is a short statute of limitations period once they come forward with their plan and their application is approved. And once that timer starts running, that's when we can actually look at the specifics of the plan and we can actually find the ways in which it does not comply with our legal requirements and that they, in fact, do need to go through ULURP. And so they may have the impression that if they deny us the information and keep it opaque until the very last second, that we won't be ready. Of course, that's unfortunately not the case for them. We are very ready. We have, our zoning expert up to speed. We have our litigator, our outside litigator that we brought in. We have litigators and zoning experts in-house. And we are waiting for the second that more information drops to dig into it and find the issues that they certainly have.
And then in terms of the way that the system is organized, we have a community board. What's their interest?
So the community board, gets to evaluate the project, but they don't have a sort of binding say on whether it can go forward or not. The real,
Do they have influence?
I believe that the community board has influence. I believe.
Can you pursue a project over the objections of the community board?
You could pursue a project over the objections of the community board, depending on the project and the particulars. In this particular case, the developer has said that because it's as of right, they think that they can essentially just go forward once they get the Department of Buildings approval.
Just quickly tell us what as of right means.
As of right means essentially that they can build what they want to build, where they want to build it, without any changes to the current zoning or requirements. Any exceptions, for example, there are lots of really nuanced things that means. Like it could be a space between windows that's required, and their plan sort of fits right within that, and that they can do that without any additional.
So as long as they're not violating any of the guidelines, as of right gives them a lot of flexibility.
Right. If it truly is as of right, which we would dispute.
So you'd have to examine that as a community representative.
Right. And here it's a little, boring and technical, but some of that comes down to the way that this original lot was done in the plan that was done for it, and whether it's a minor modification of that plan or a major modification. Now, we obviously believe that it's somewhat obvious that this would be a major.
I can see the glaze coming over the audience. Well, we'll rely on you to make those nuanced distinctions. So going from community board, then you have city council.
Mm-hmm.
What's their role?
Well, it depends. So in the case where the project does need to go through ULURP, which is the process where there is the opportunity for the public to participate, at the end of that rainbow, there's a city council vote. And the city council typically practices something called member deference. And what that means is that typically the city council will vote however the local sitting city council representative thinks that they should vote for a land use project in their district. So in this particular case, our city council representative is Chris Marte. And so it would really come down to what does he think about the project. And
I've read that that one consequence of the city of yes is that that implicit veto has been diluted, and that the city council person may not continue to have quite the leverage or influence over that process.
There's been some talk as to whether, there will be an erosion of member deference. I think it sort of remains to be seen what's going to happen with that.
Okay. So you have community board, city council. Now we have a very charismatic and exciting new mayor, who's certainly at least in terms of his statements and his actions, one assumes he'd be generally sympathetic with the goals of your coalition. But I could see also where conceptually these things may be in conflict. I know I read an article, I'm sure most people did this morning, about the new housing person in his administration, in Mom Donnie's administration. And she was struggling with the complexities of the underlying financing of these affordable projects, or projects which have an affordability component. She was remarking, or I think the reporting on the piece declared that a lot of the nonprofits that are engaged in affordable development are struggling financially. And then, of course, the developer community, lawyer representing them, and also from Bremney, I think observed that, that the economics just aren't there. Now, that might be their negotiating position, and it's maybe their job to have that position, but it does seem like the desire to address the affordability issue and the realities of the marketplace and the players involved, there's some clashes ahead.
Certainly. I mean, so it remains to be seen how Mamdani is going to respond to issues like this and what his actual approach will be. I know in his speech, he mentioned the word abundance, and the word abundance is commonly associated with, when it comes to housing, this theory that I was talking about earlier, where if you build more, everything becomes more affordable, even if what you're talking about building is luxury. And it's really an appealing story from the perspective of what you're talking about, which is affordable housing developers, which, by the way, affordable housing development can be massively profitable and done by for-profit companies. But, sort of saying,
are there examples in Tribeca of that?
Well, so, this is actually interesting because that's something that we've been looking at. And I think that when you look at the very profitable affordable housing developers, they're not developing in areas like Tribeca. And, this is
because the luxury development opportunity is
so much greater. So much greater. Yeah. And in Tribeca, we think a large part of that is the unlimited height, the lack of height limits. Because if you can build that pencil tower and sell a $30 million penthouse or more, if you're seeing on Billionaires Row, some of those are listing for over 100 just in the penthouse, let alone all the other units.
But these things are moving 12 or 14 feet in the breeze. I mean, that's put $100 million into that. Mm-hmm. We're looking at a community of parents and children. You've already described how there's older people living there. There are, as we know, excellent public schools. A lot of variety and diversity, but we're aiming for more. What's your vision of what a community that probably hasn't really gotten organized before can do to educate itself and identify pathways of activism to do its level best to define how it sees its future and then try to enforce that?
I think the first step is to become aware of what is possible in Tribeca and understand why what is possible is what will happen given enough time. And part of that, I mean, you mentioned our fantastic public schools. One of the sites that could be built into an ultra luxury tower with unlimited height is the site of PS 234. Another one is the community college. And so, I think the first step is to become aware of these sites and does it impact you? What's it going to mean if suddenly it becomes so profitable to build a skyscraper where the school is that the school actually gets moved or put inside a skyscraper? Wow. Right now, there's a street level playground.
The incentive would be, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, street level playground.
Well, at 234, there's a street level playground, which is incredibly rare for schools in New York City. And it's really important for child development to be able to run around in the fresh air on the ground.
So you're alluding to the possibility of Manhattan Borough Community College mm-hmm. having a windfall.
That's right. So at some point, the developer actually, Vornado has been trying to do this for over 30 years. That particular property is probably the most valuable property in Manhattan right now. It's right on the water. And right now, all that's there is the low-rise community college.
And it runs from Chambers to Harrison?
I think that's right.
Yeah. Well, no, it goes over Harrison, probably goes up further to, what's the next one? It's not Franklin, but the next one past that. So And that is waterfront property.
And it could be developed into, depending on how the developer did it, 3 or 4 super tall towers.
Right.
And so I think it's important for people as a first step to become aware that this is a real possibility, and that if we don't do anything, we're going to see the loss of these very important public resources.
Yes.
So I think that's the first step, that realize like we're not just here with our tinfoil hats talking about, really hypothetical things. We're talking about very, very real things, and
Yes.
things that happen every single day in New York City and will continue to happen unless we do something.
Yes.
And I think, the second thing that people can do is start to participate in that. When our first town hall meeting, we had a lot of people show up and say, "What are you going to do about it?" And I said, "What are you going to do about
Right.
it?"
Good.
This is nothing if it's just me, and it is everything if everyone wants to participate. And
Well, you
there's
have
many
Richard
things.
Foreman on your team. It's not
We do.
you're not disabled. This is a high performing group. All right, but I think my sense of how people are faring in this political environment is that they need a pathway.
Mhm.
And I think it wouldn't be unfair to invite your coalition to at least explore what those pathways might look like, so that when you then ask people, what are you going to do, that they have some options.
Mhm.
Because I think they feel fairly impotent.
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of really concrete things, the first thing I would say people can do is go on our website and sign our petition. Now, when I first started this, there were a lot of people who said, well, a petition doesn't do anything. And they're right. It doesn't do anything in itself. But what it does is it's a mechanism to go to our policy stakeholders, and it's a mechanism to go to Vornado and to say, this is how many people care
Yeah.
about this.
All right. So that's the Community First Development Coalition.org
Mhm.
website.
Yes.
And you're asking people who live in our community to add their names to that petition.
That's right.
Good.
Yep.
Concrete.
Yes. You can sign the petition. You can come to our meetings when we have them, any town hall. You can come to CB1, the community board meetings, and learn about what's happening. But what we've learned in all of our conversations with organizations who have been really successful at influencing change is that it is extremely important to show up in numbers and to show that a large number of people in the community care about these issues.
Right. Well, you only need to look at the example of the streets of Minneapolis to get a pretty clear indication of what it means to have a community that is oppressed and feeling underrepresented, that shows up in force. It's a very inspiring model. So do you have any closing thoughts? You started by articulating the core purpose of the coalition. I think it would be worth reminding folks what those cornerstone principles are.
Yeah, I mean, just to say it really succinctly, because we're at the end here, I think for us, it's about we need height limits in Tribeca. We need mandatory affordability in Tribeca. And without those things, we're going to continue to see development that harms the community. And we need a community voice and participation. And that's what we're all about, is trying to get people to come out, to participate, to come to community meetings, to share their thoughts with us. And, with that, I would just also welcome anyone to go on our website and find our emails and reach out and say, I have an idea about this, or did you know about this building on this block, or have you heard of this project? Because every time somebody does that, it's enormously helpful and leads us in a new direction. And we really want to hear from everyone.
It's great. Well, it's really inspiring to hear all of your fine work and the ideas that you've developed and progress that you've made. And I'm proud myself to be a member of the coalition, and I think most people in our building are. And we'll look forward to more conversations with you and your team as we move forward.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.